This is Jonathan Gilliam back on the Experts Podcast. The truth has arrived. And we got a lot to talk about today. The Democrat convention is on as we speak. And rather than live broadcast that nonsense, I'm going to kind of concentrate a little bit on who these people are and some of the stuff that's been going on behind the headlines that is going to give you a little bit of insight into the depth of the deep state that many people, they don't go beyond what you see with James Comey or these idiots in Congress. They don't really go past anywhere that Fox News goes. That's about as deep as people go. And I do mean almost everybody. So let's start here. I want to just cover some headlines real quick that kind of are leading. Remember, I said this numerous times that a lot of these headlines will paint a picture for you that no specific story will paint. And so we're going to paint that picture today as I go through these headlines. And you're going to, by the end of the show, well, you may not be amazed. You probably will be amazed, but you're going to be, it's really going to solidify what a lot of you already believe and already know. Now, the reason I say what I say about nobody else really goes past what Fox News has to say is that it really doesn't matter who you turn to, with the exception of maybe Michael Savage. That's about it. Everybody that's a conservative radio or podcaster that's big, that has a big name, are people that are either contributors of Fox News or they have a show on Fox News. And so it never really goes beyond what Fox covers, even on their podcasts. I mean, I'm talking about every single one. All these people that you have stars in your eyes for, that they're telling you the truth about all this stuff, they're telling you the truth. It's just that their truth stops and never educates you on how to see the reality of what's going on, far beyond what they just report on Fox News. You see, the deep state, for instance, for years and years and years, all they've talked about was the deep state that immediately affects the president. But there's a deep state that's been for long working, years and years and years. I'm not talking about 5 years or 10 years. I'm talking about 60 years, 70 years, 100 years, 200 years. There's been a movement that throughout the years of this country has solidified what you're seeing now. There are people in politics where their belief system has been handed down generation to generation. And it's been worked through the universities. It's been worked through the elites. And the more I've been around these elites, the more I realize, I've realized this for a long time, but it just becomes more and more apparent that it has always been there in one way, shape, or form. These people who spew word salad. And they never, especially when it comes to media, they never go beyond the headline. This is the headline. These people are bad. And they never quite go past there, because to do that empowers the people. Now, there's a lot of people that are in the podcasting or the radio shows now, and they're handpicked by people that are in charge, and just a few people that are in charge of these radio shows, radio stations, radio networks, and television networks. And you have to remember that they're choosing these people based on an entertainment, what they conceive as entertainment value, not what you conceive. Yes, they do go off of ratings, but it very similar to the Discovery Channel and all its family networks. They don't go beyond what they already know is going to make them some money or get them ratings, right? They're never going to take a chance. They're never going to go far beyond that to the point where, well, let's say Roger Ailes really did. Rupert Murdoch and Roger Ailes, which is a very strange combo, but Rupert Murdoch is a businessman. And he saw the benefit of what was there, this empty space that conservatives didn't have a voice. And while I do believe that Rupert Murdoch and his sons believe that conservatives are stupid because they're the highbrow people that I'm talking about, Roger Ailes saw the reality of what was going on. One of the things that I think that they got right in all these movies that they do where they have about Roger Ailes and Fox News, despite what he was, I don't know exactly what the truth is and where it stops and where it begins, but Roger Ailes was paranoid for a good reason. He was surrounded in a world, a cesspool of people who are either entertainers, faking knowledge in world events, narcissists who truly believe, or they've led themselves to believe, and for some reason they have this magic ability to lead others to believe, and they're compulsive liars, and so they just consistently change and tweak their message a little bit to keep people following them. Or a combination of those and this highbrow, word salad, highly educated type of speech. And that historically has been meant to keep the common folk down to where they believe this person knows more than I do. We have to turn to them in order to know the truth. And so when you look at what is reported in the news and how all these lackeys, yes, I'm using that word, these lackeys of Fox News and all these conservative bloggers and conservative, I don't even know if anybody uses that word anymore, but all these conservative writers, quote unquote, conservative writers, these new conservatives, the young people, the people that are Fox News contributors and have a Fox News show and are making millions and millions of dollars off of you. They don't educate you for one of two reasons. They don't want to go beyond what is reported because they don't want to stir headlines, or they just don't know, and they're just following that narrative. And that narrative is about as far as they can see. Now, what does this have to do with the Democrat Party, and what does this have to do with the headlines that are going on now, and where am I going with this? The more, and I've told you this from the beginning of this show, from years and years ago, the more I learn, and I'm constantly learning as well, and the more I see and the more headlines I read and the more I study day after day as I'm doing this show and have been doing this show for years and radio shows and so on and so forth, what I consistently see is that there are headlines, and this is my first show, or it was the first show where I talked about media, a couple shows after that where I talked about how the headlines are the first place that the lies start. The headlines are so controlled that as I can go through all of Drudge Report or Fox News or CNN, I can tell you exactly how this network is going to lean towards the right or how that network is going to lean towards the left. I can look at one liberal newspaper or one liberal online publication or one online or one television network, and I can tell you without a doubt as I go through all of the liberal media outlets exactly what the headlines are going to be. I can already tell you what they're going to be saying at the Democrat convention. I can already tell you that. But what most people don't realize is it's the exact same way with the right. And there's this entire system of news collection or news manipulation, headline manipulation that is being worked over on the right and the left. With you, the American people, whether you think you're liberal or conservative, Democrat or Republican or libertarian or independent, you are being played constantly. And every once in a while, these days exist where I can just look at the headlines and it just pops. So as we, let's just take, for instance, I picked out some of the best stories here that point this out. The Democratic convention, as we all know, is on tonight, and they're going to have 5 Republican speakers. 5 so-called Republican speakers. Now, the reality of those people and who they actually are is that they are not 5 Republicans. They are exactly like Mitt Romney, who I'll talk about in just a minute, but they basically are people that have an agenda, just like the people in media. And I would say left. They're leftist liars, just like I talked about in the past about the guy who is the CEO of the Washington Post, worked in the Reagan administration, and is the the director of the board of the Reagan Institute. And when we look at these 5 individuals, these 5 quote unquote Republicans, the media loves to say that. We're looking at New Jersey Governor Christine Todd Whitman, former New York Republican Representative Susan Molinari. Of course, you got former governor of Ohio, John Kasich. And here's the interesting one. Quibi CEO, Meg Whitman, who also ran for governor of California and failed. Now, the interesting thing about Meg Whitman is that when you look at Quibi, and if you want to know what Quibi is basically a mashup on words of quick bites. I think is what it means. Let's see. It's a mashup of, a quick and bites. And it's like 10-minute episodes that you can, it's a subscription-based platform that you can download and watch, short shows. But it's interesting because, she calls herself a Republican, right? She calls herself a Republican, but yet she's in partnership with Jeffrey Katzenberg, who used to be head of Disney. Very, very leftist, not even liberal, leftist. And it makes you sit back and look at these people, which is what I'm going to try to point out today, is that as you look at these people, the reality of who they are is that they are liars. They're not Republicans. They're not constitutionalists. These are people. These are big money people. These are individuals who have the higher education. Listen, I have college degree as well, okay? The thing about these people is that they believe they are highbrow. They believe that they are the big money, the elite, the leaders of the country, as they would say. It's all a lie. These people are no brighter of a bulb than anyone else. They portray themselves as these great leaders and of these people who with this great knowledge, but so did Satan. Now, I know I sound a little bit amped up today because I am. As I go, like I said, as I go through these headlines and this stuff pops out at me, the fake, just the overall fakeness of who these people are and the charade that's been played for hundreds, really it's thousands of years, but in this country, almost from the very beginning, there were people who were in opposition of the way that the founding fathers wanted the country to go. And as we get into the 1900s, or let's say the late 1800s, when Karl Marx himself was a writer for what became the New York Times, it continued to grow. And listen, Karl Marx is one of the worst of these types of people who grows up rich, who believes that he knows more because he has a college education. This country was built on the backs of individuals who were not even college educated. And I'm not putting down education. It's the ethics and the morals and the person that you are that makes the difference. That's where knowledge and wisdom comes from. Knowledge can be book-based, but knowledge of mankind, understanding of the reality of why we are here, compiling that with experience in life, and gaining wisdom. Those people have none of this. I don't care if they're the most studied person in the world. Let's look at the majority of people who are the deepest, darkest destroyers throughout history. They've been some of the most educated. It doesn't mean that they have wisdom. They have an academic knowledge. And quite often with these types of people, it is used in ways to belittle the people and to gain power. Now, I said 5 Republicans. I guess it's 4 Republicans that are going to be speaking tonight. But regardless, 4 or 5, there's plenty more where those 4 came from that would be willing to step up to the plate. There's no doubt about that. Mitt Romney is one of those individuals. Now, he had us all fooled when he was running against Obama. And everybody thought Mitt Romney is a legitimate good guy. Big business. Mormon. Don't get me started on that. Mormon. Somebody who has a vision for the country and falls in line with conservative values. Couldn't have been more wrong. It was one of the reasons why I started to understand the reality of what was being preached to us through media. Because Mitt Romney is a complete failure. He's a backstabbing failure. He's a demon to this country. And he goes on to say that the president and the Trump administration is to blame for the COVID deaths. Now, I was like kind of taken back by that when I saw that. It doesn't surprise me. But it was when I started to read the rest of the headlines. Remember, one of the things that they do is they use these so-called Republicans to build these narratives. And they'll use now Fox News, as we've seen, especially daytime Fox News, which is it's as far left as CNN used to be before Trump was elected. That's where Fox News is now. The evening shows are more conservative. But like I said before, when you look at who Tucker Carlson relates to and who he has on his show as experts a lot of the times are these weirdo paleo conservatives, they call themselves, these young people, many of them have not even graduated college yet, who are trying to tell the president and everybody else on how the country should be. And they're the most anti-Semitic people I see on Twitter. Hate Israel. And that's who Tucker Carlson has on his show on a regular basis. Most of them are associated with the Daily Caller, which he used to be part owner of, and I'm sure he still has a stake in somehow. When we look at Sean Hannity, when we look at Laura Ingraham. So those 3 shows are the true conservative shows on Fox News that are left. Bret Baier, he does good reporting, and he's very dry, but he never has an expert on his show. His show is full of journalists, quote unquote journalists, who have an opinions about, just like these paleo conservative weirdos, like they know exactly everything that's going on in Washington, D.C. and how it should be. But they never go outside of the political narrative. All right, so I'm not even putting Bret Baier in this category of these 3 conservative shows that are left on Fox News. After Laura Ingraham comes Shannon Bream, who is just a little less liberal as far as her show goes. I don't know about her own standings, just a little bit less liberal than Martha McCallum, who Martha McCallum is on par with Shepard Smith. Everybody thought it was going to be great when Shepard Smith left. It actually got more liberal. So when we look at those 3 shows, Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity, and Laura Ingraham, none of those shows go outside of the narrative. They stick very close to the political narrative. They only mention the parts of the deep state that are associated with the president in the headlines. And that's it. They don't go deeply into anything. Now, when we look at the rest of these headlines and the way this is all associated, okay, we look at Mitt Romney, how he was talking about COVID and blaming the president for COVID deaths. Well, guess who else has jumped onto that? Of course, the governors have. Cuomo has blamed, and he will blame tonight in a prepared speech, which they've already put part of that out, putting the blame on the president. Now, that alone shows you that they're already coordinating this narrative. It's already coordinated. They're putting it out, okay? Here's all you need to know about COVID. I've talked about this 1,000 times on this show. March 25th is when most of these Democrat governors that killed over 60,000 people well over 6,000 people here in New York. We're talking probably over 10,000 people in New York alone, New York State. These governors, these Democrat governors mandated that these COVID positive patients be put into these elderly clinics. And the death rate soared. So did the infection rate. It soared. And then on May 10th, Governor Cuomo, and so did, I don't know about the exact dates for the other governors, but Cuomo changed that executive order or that mandate. He changed it to where that was not the case anymore. They didn't have to put the COVID positive patients, elderly patients, in elderly clinics, which, don't mistake these elderly nursing homes. They don't nurse anybody. They're not rehabilitation clinics. They're a lie. They are assisted living at best. They're brutal. They offer nothing. I mean, if an elderly person doesn't feel like they need to get out of bed, these people don't rehabilitate them and help them to get out of bed. They're going to stay in that bed. That's a whole nother story. But you have this period of time from March 25th to May 10th. We knew before May that it was dangerous to have COVID positive patients around elderly people. We knew that. How did we know that? Because the president's administration told everyone every single day it was dangerous and deadly for elderly people. The rest of the people, they said, not that bad. Safe for young children. Don't worry about it. By and large, they've proved that correct. Or time has proved that correct. But before March 25th, we were told by the Trump administration, watch out, it's dangerous to elderly people. If you wanted to go to it, I remember all these conservative Twitter heroes talking about how there's no lines at the hospitals. There's nobody in the parking lots. Obviously, the hospitals are not full. Well, they were full. A lot in the hot spots. The emergency rooms were full. The hospitals were full of COVID patients. Most of them were elderly. And many of those people were shipped to elderly clinics. One of the reasons why the parking lots were not full is because not the patient, but if you were a family member, you were not allowed in the hospitals. So there was no reason for the hospital parking lots to be full. They were full of COVID patients. You were not allowed to go in there. Now, why is that important? What does that have to do with Romney and Cuomo and this narrative? They're blaming the president for these COVID deaths and for the spike in COVID infections. But the president is the one that said, don't put anybody around elderly people. It's the most dangerous for them. And then, without us being allowed to go see them because we may infect them, they then put COVID positive patients into these homes. That was the governor's decisions, Democrat Party decisions. And then, after it killed 60,000 or more, probably way more people than that across the United States, which is more people than we lost in all of Vietnam, they stopped it. And all of a sudden, the death rate went down, the infection rate went down, and then the protests started. States started to open back up. The infection rate skyrocketed, but the death rate did not. Now, you cannot blame any of that on President Trump or his administration. But that's not what the narrative is going to tell you, and that's not what the headlines are going to tell you. And that's not what I just showed you, in as far as the timeline goes, is not what's going to be pointed out on any of these, even the 3 conservative shows on Fox News. They're not going to go into detail, which is very simple. I did it in 5 minutes. They're not going to go into detail about this. Why? Because this political debate that goes back and forth is what I was describing at the beginning. It's just like the Discovery Channel. You see moonshiners, shows on Alaska, and Shark Week every year. They don't go outside of that parameter because they don't want to take the chance on losing money. They don't want to take a chance on people tuning out. They want to take the chance on, well, this is what they're familiar with. That's what we're going to put up there. So instead of taking the chance on having a tremendous hit that they could make tons of money and have the largest ratings of ever, they'll just stick with what's safe. And that's the political narrative that you see in media. That's why even Fox News doesn't go beyond, and all these podcasters and radio hosts that are also contributors on Fox, that's why they don't go beyond those headlines. Now, on CNN, it's the other way around. At MSNBC, they go far beyond the lies, the normal little lies. See, we're looking at Fox News, and I'm using Fox as a standard on conservative because there's really, I could say AON or Newsmax, but it's just not the case because One American News, OAN, which I love that network, One American News is not anywhere close to being as big as Fox, nor is Newsmax. So I don't really even count them in this because their influence on this is nothing. Fox News is the gold standard as far as power in conservative news. And really, Sirius XM Patriot Channel, I would say, along with Salem Radio and some others, and Westwood One Radio, are the power hitters when it comes to conservative talk radio. And then you have your podcasters who are the big guns in podcasting. But none of them go beyond this conservative, these talking points, this narrative. They don't go deeply into it. It's the truth. I'm not saying that they're lying. They just don't go far beyond that back and forth little tennis match between liberal and conservative. Liberals, on the other hand, you know how when you see these tennis matches, when they're going back and forth over the net, and then the ball bounces off one guy's or one female's racket, and it goes way up in the air, and then you see the other person go back, and then they smack the ball as hard as they can. That's what CNN does. They go far to the left. They lie like crazy. MSNBC, Drudge Report, all these online networks, when it comes to the left, they lie and stretch the truth and go far beyond what is even provable. They use anonymous sources. They say things that they know are not true or they're half-truths because they're not going to get questioned. Why? Because nobody on the left or the right questioned the media. The right just says CNN's fake news. Nobody ever questions, why don't we hear anything else besides the same headlines every day? Many of these shows, it's the same show every day. If you listen to this podcast, it pains me to say the same things on a daily basis. A lot of the times the headlines that are out there never go past what you would see on a daily basis. They're just there. It's the same thing because if I'm not in DC or if my sources don't have certain information for me, I'm not going to be able to get far beyond those headlines. Days like today, though, are a gift. Now, I hope you're clear with where I'm going with this and exactly what I'm saying. Because when I look at, I've discussed the Democrat convention, which is going to be going on now as you're listening to the show, or if you listen to it tomorrow, it's going to be going on the day before. Jesse Smollett, here's another example of how this narrative never goes past the headlines, or how the information that you're being given doesn't go past the narrative of the headlines. That's a better way to say it. Special prosecutor in the Jesse Smollett investigation finds Kim Foxx's office, that's the prosecutor, mishandled the case. Now, he ruled that the office abused its discretion in the case against the actor, but did nothing criminal. Now, how does this sound familiar? It's exactly like Comey. The reality is there was a ton of stuff that was done criminal by Kim Foxx and by the others that were involved with Jesse Smollett, with the lies that, they constantly go throughout here and saying that they lied to the media. They didn't just lie to the media. They lied to the people. They lied to the courts. And they ended up, this guy basically got off with a $10,000 fine and a couple of weeks of work that he did with Jesse Jackson in his nonprofit, doing basically nothing. But the real story behind this is the special prosecutor. Special prosecutors are political hatch jobs. They're political operatives. They don't do anything. Rarely do you ever get anything out of a special prosecutor that amounts to anything. And that's the truth. When you look at these special prosecutors, they waste millions and millions of taxpayers' dollars. Mueller, perfect example. Whitewater, perfect example. Jesse Smollett, perfect example. Anywhere you see the word special prosecutor, you can almost guarantee that nothing's going to come out of it. Tons of money is going to be spent. Lawyers are going to get rich off of it. And it's nothing more than a political circus. Another part of this narrative that's being put out right now that is still yet another example of how these narratives spin up and how they're put out, and nobody questions it, and you're not shown anything, whether you're on the left or the right, you're not shown anything by media except the headline and the specific story or facts or lies that they put on the story right behind the headlines. Now you have governors and mayors that are accusing the president of the violence that's spreading across the country. They neglect to talk about the fact that these people that are causing the violence are leftist. Many of the times they'll blame groups like the Proud Boys or the Boogaloo Boys. The Boogaloo Boys, the only thing I really know about them is that they are anarchists. They're no different than the people on the left that are out there doing stuff. The majority of people that are involved with the Boogaloo Boys are cop haters, from what I can gather. And they even have people that are part of Black Lives Matter that support that. As far as the Proud Boys go, I don't know anything about them. But I do know this. They're not the instigators of this stuff. They're guys that show up and stand up to Antifa. It's not like they're showing up for a Proud Boys beatdown of a city or trying to burn down federal buildings. Wherever Antifa is at, there's a chance that the Proud Boys may show up, and that's all I know about them. I don't think that anybody else in media can report anything else, but what they do is they show in the headlines, oh my goodness, the Proud Boys are here and Antifa, and it's disgusting the way that they were fighting, and yada, and it goes on, and there's no real story behind why they're there or why they're standing up to Antifa. And why is that? It's because, not that I'm supporting the Proud Boys, again, I don't know anything about them, but I can tell you that the headlines won't report who they are or why they're doing it. They'll just spin them as white supremacists or white nationals, and they're not going to report anything about why they're there because they want to make it sound like it's chaotic and the group, this is a white group, and that is an anarchist or the Antifa group who believe in Black lives or they hate Trump and that they're coming together and they're fighting. That's all they make it sound to be. But the reality is, It goes way beyond that because Antifa is the one that's causing the majority of this stuff, along with leftists. I mean, it's planned. It's not like Antifa just wakes up in the morning and says, let's go riot because we're anarchists. This is all a part of a larger conspiracy, not conspiracy theory, a conspiracy, a planned criminal organization that is composed of people that are plotting together to do two or more crimes for their furtherance of that criminal entity. That criminal enterprise. That's what's happening around this nation, and that criminal enterprise is communism. I don't know how many times I have to say that. Some idiot on Twitter today was making a comment on something I said, and he said, you cannot call Biden and Bernie the same. You can't say that they're both communists because they're not. Well, yeah, they are. That's what I responded. Yes, Bernie and Biden are both communists. Remember, it doesn't matter if you ran into the bank and said, give me your money, if you sat in the car outside waiting for those guys to come out after robbing the bank so you could get them away. You're all part of the conspiracy to rob that bank. Now, the violence is just a part of the narrative that you're going to hear at the Democratic convention, along with the COVID blame. All this stuff is being put on President Trump. But as you can see, as I'm showing, beyond the headlines, all the proof is there. The proof is there. Go ask the people. You look at the videos that are coming out. They're all over Twitter and social media where the people are there saying they're Antifa, saying they're communists, saying that they hate Trump. And yet they still blame him. They blame him in the news, and they don't go on the right, on these and Fox News and these different hosts of these shows, they don't stray beyond the political back and forth enough to explain to you the reality that that narrative is a lie. They bring it up, but they never fully explain it. And they never put these things together and show you the clear picture of what's being crafted and how it's being put out there. Why don't they do that? Probably because they're a part of it. As all these quote unquote Republicans that are going to be speaking at the Democrat convention. Now, here's the other one all this is like the trifecta of the narrative now against Trump as we lead into November. That the voting is going to be one big, huge scam, and it's going to be caused by President Trump. And that he's trying, as Pelosi is saying, that she's calling members back to Capitol Hill to consider the United States Postal Service legislation, calls the post office election central amid coronavirus. That's the headline. I mean, this is just another part of this narrative. They're trying to make everything sound as though it's the president's fault. The fact is, voting is the most important thing Americans can do. It's the one, even though we have crappy candidates most of the time, especially out here on Long Island, Republican Party on Long Island, besides Lee Zeldin, I mean, Peter King, and the guy who's, probably going to win in his district, the other people that are out here in Long Island that don't give two craps about what happened in these elderly clinics. And why don't they? They don't care because they get paid by these people. Their campaigns get huge donations. And because the majority of these people that run in the Republican Party and actually get picked in a lot of places around the East Coast, Upper East Coast, are all leftists. Or they're just criminal. So the vote by mail is the thing that is the most important for the citizenry of this country. You should never give up your right to go vote in person. You cannot trust the United States Postal Service. There's not a month goes by. If I order something more than 3 times, one of those things are going to end up at my neighbor's or missing. How many of you out there have had issues with the Postal Service? How long does it take? It's not like when you get on a plane with a carry-on and that's all you have, you unless the plane crashes, your luggage or whatever you're bringing with is going to get there. But when you go and you check your bags, you know that sinking feeling you get that you may never see those bags again? That's exactly the way it is with the mail carriers in this country now. I'll tell you a story about the United States Postal Service. When I was in college, I had a friend, female friend. She worked at Cozy Mel's, was the Mexican restaurant. I don't know if it's still around. It was a chain of restaurants. One day, she's coming home from work, Cozy Mel shirt on, and the mailman was putting mail at their apartment building, putting mails in their mailboxes. And she said, "Oh, could I get my mail from you since I'm here?" And the postman said, "Yeah, what apartment are you in?" He takes the mail and he says, "Okay, here you go." And he calls her by her first name because he looks at her envelope. Now he has her name, he has where she lives, and he knows where she works because it's on her shirt. A couple days later, she gets a knock on the door. And when she opens the door, there's the postman. It's like 7 o'clock at night, and he's drunk. She can smell it. And he puts his foot in the door, and he starts talking to her and tries to push his way into the apartment. She tells him that her boyfriend's on the way over. She can't really talk to him right now. And he leaves. About a week later, she's at work and somebody pinches her on the rear end. She turns around. It's the postman. Sounds like something out of a horror story. Do you want to leave your vote up to someone like that? Now, that is one in, I don't know how many thousands of postal workers that there are. I have a couple of friends actually who do deliver the mail, and they're great people. All right? It's not that everybody's like that, but what if the one that carries your vote is like that? And what if they like Biden? What if they hate Trump? What if they don't like you? They can do whatever they want and it's going to disappear. I know multiple times people have lost things in the mail, and when they try to get it investigated by the post office doesn't do crap. because it's ran like a government agency. And trust me, folks, I've worked for several. They don't go far and beyond anything that they're told to do. Your vote needs to be cast by you in person. And I don't even like the electronic stuff because I don't know who's making that electronic stuff. In Arkansas, we used to have a paper ballot. You would go in there and you literally would, with a pencil, you wouldn't even darken in a circle and put it through a Scantron. You would literally take this piece of paper and complete an arrow that pointed to the person that you were voting for with a pen. That's the way it should be. They should have cops there guarding those polls and guarding those ballots. And they should have National Guard deployed to make sure that no one except for voters get into the vicinity of the voting area. So you have the right to vote for whoever you want without intimidation and without worry that your vote is going to be skewed electronically or by the post office or anything else. You should be voting in person. The very fact that they're able to skew this and make it sound like you should be voting by mail and it's safe is about the most egregious lie I've ever heard. But the fact that they're blaming the possibility that it's going to be messed up because of Trump, or that the votes will be stolen because of Trump, or that the entire thing will be overthrown because of Trump is absolutely crazy, but it's a part of the same narrative. The fact is that the news, including Fox News, may look at each one of these things and even have headlines on them. The headline I read a minute ago about Romney and the COVID comment came from foxnews.com. But when you look at the headlines and you look at this narrative and how all of it is pointing at Trump, it is painting a picture of what is occurring right now in front of you. It's painting a picture of a big arrow pointing straight at Trump. But here's the thing. When you paint that arrow, it's also the back end of the arrow is showing you where it came from. And it's all pointing back to the Democrat Party. It's all pointing back to the left. It's all pointing back to the media, all of which want you to vote against Trump because he's not a part of the deep state, because he's not a part of the leftists, because he's not a part of the people that want to overthrow this country. He is not a part. I know he talks about how rich he is and about how successful he is, but he is not a part of this elitist group of snobby bitches in the world that think they know better than you do and that you should bow down to them. Now, let's take a break real quick. We're going to come back, and this is probably the most important part of this show as far as my description of this deep state beyond what the media talks about. We'll be right back. You've probably heard me talk about my best-selling book, Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness in Attack Survival. But what you may not realize is that it's not just a book that you read. It's a book that you apply. For those people who have read it or listened to it on audiobook, they would tell you that once you gain this knowledge, it will change your life forever. Understanding how an attacker sees you is a life-changing experience, and it's not rocket science. This book shows you how they systematically target you and how you can take that knowledge to turn around and apply into better defenses or awareness or overall security. Now, there's two workbooks that you can take this knowledge and apply. The first one is the threat assessment workbook, where you actually do a threat assessment on yourself, on your business, your church, your school, your city, your country. Workbook number 2 is where you take that information from the threat assessment and you develop your defenses on paper before you go out and spend money and time. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. That's your knowledge base. Workbook number 1, the threat assessment, is how you look at yourself from the attacker and apply it. And workbook number 2, the defense assessment, is the culmination of all that into your defenses. There is nothing else out there like this. No course, no book, nothing. Go get it. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. It's 2 accompanying workbooks. Make your homeland secure again. Go get it wherever books are sold. All right. Just to let you in on a little scoop, probably shouldn't do this on my podcast, but that commercial that you just heard, normally I do those in one take. That one took about 40. I don't know what's the problem today, but I'm just not feeling it. But anyway, boo-hoo. I wanted to give you an example before the end of the show of the deep state and how far beyond the headlines that this actually extends. You're not going to hear this type of in-depth coverage of what the deep state is in any of these other networks. Now, when I went through and I kept teasing this thing about, if you hear the thunder out back, it just started raining. That's crazy. But I kept teasing about LinkedIn and how things have changed dramatically on LinkedIn. Next to Twitter, LinkedIn is the biggest troll farm I've ever seen in my life. I started posting my speeches, or at least portions of the speech, after I give them, like I gave one up in Albany at a rally against the criminal Governor Cuomo. And I was talking about how you need to stop looking at yourself as Democrat, Republican, or Libertarian, because you've been played by all of them. And the reality is freedom is the only thing that matters right now, and sustaining that. And still I got attacked by leftists. It is unbelievable, next to Twitter, how bad LinkedIn is. It's far surpassed Facebook for leftists. The biggest difference between all of those is that these are people, LinkedIn, whether you know what it is or not, LinkedIn is a social media platform for employers and employees to go and put their resumes up there, and for people to get hired and to find them, adequate employees to give jobs to. So it's a very odd place for politics, and I refrained from it until this year. But the fact is, I've given speeches on this and writing articles and a podcast, so I didn't want to hide it anymore, because it can actually, I want to spread that word right now, because it could actually have a profound effect on some of these powerful business people, I hope. So with that came these attacks from the left, but it's very strange, because they say stuff like, they're dropping F-bombs, insulting Trump, saying the most vile things. And here's the interesting thing about these people is that when they truly have Trump derangement syndrome, they cannot stop saying crazy stuff. Like one guy just confessed on there that he has mental issues, and that it came back to the fact that he was raised under a Methodist preacher and this and that and that's why he doesn't buy into the line that the Republicans feed, and it wasn't until he got out from under the conservatism and that line, yada yada. And I wrote back, I'm like, well, congratulations. I hope you get some medication and pray to the dear Lord above that whatever prospective employer you are looking to get hired by doesn't see what you just wrote. That's how crazy these people are. Well, the co-founder of LinkedIn in 2018 was caught up in a scam that most people never even covered. He himself used the word false flag, and it was a false flag operation that was done against Roy Moore, who was running for Senate in Alabama. He said, this is what he said afterward the fact. He says that I categorically, tough word for today, I categorically disavow the use of misinformation to sway an election. Okay, sure you do. And disavow, I love the way they say that, the way the media covers that, as though when somebody says I disavow it, that means that they are fully exonerated from any type of guilt. Not the case, okay? We know that for a fact, because very interesting thing. As I started to dig down this rabbit hole, and remember, the reason I was looking into this was because I thought it was the perfect example of where the deep state exists in a lot of ways that the media just will never cover. And so therefore, you probably will not have access to this understanding unless somehow, some way you have a source in there that can give you this information. Well, I'm just going to read part of this article that actually came from, I think it was the New York Times, where they were reporting on this. It says that Mr. Hoffman, that's Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, had spent on a deception social media campaign to aid Doug Jones, who was the Democrat candidate. He'd spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. who he barely defeated Roy Moore in that election. The money went to a small group of social media experts that included a guy named Jonathan Morgan, the chief executive of New Knowledge, a cybersecurity firm. Now, it's very interesting because when I saw that, all the people that are attacking me on LinkedIn are people who are executives at cybersecurity firms, right? Which the reality is, when it comes to cybersecurity, a lot of these firms work in and around DC. It's not as though they're going to be doing things for you. They don't even do things for a lot of the majority of companies out across the United States. This is mainly government stuff. And for instance, Jonathan Morgan, when you look him up, he was involved with when the CIA, they didn't say the CIA, but it was intelligence community. I'm assuming it was the CIA, probably the FBI as well, were involved in trying to find out how ISIS recruits online and then go against them in their recruiting. Now, you may have heard of this type of technology recently where General McCraven, the leftist general who hid it very, very well until just recently when he was reported to be an advisor for a company that created the DARPA technology to do exactly what this guy, Jonathan Morgan, was involved with, which is going out, seeing how they recruit online, and then countering that with like they do now on Twitter with bots and different things like that to overwhelm the conversation and break down the recruitment. Now, it's very interesting when I look at Jonathan Morgan and what he said when he came out and spoke out against this, because I think it caused some heat with Facebook. I think he got banned from Facebook or something like that. But he says himself, his own background. In 2013, since 2013, he says, and this are his words, I have analyzed how the internet can shape extreme politics and social beliefs. Now, it's very interesting because this is what this guy was doing, and it's what he was employed by our government to do. And then he turns around and is a part of a Democrat leftist campaign against a conservative in Alabama, which Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, helped pay for. He goes on to say his work started with a technology nonprofit called Ushahidi, I think is how you say that. Let's see how the computer says that.
Ushahidi.
Ushahidi. I don't know if that's correct or not, but that's the name of the company. Very interesting name. To understand conflicts around the world from common social media platforms, for example, Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and YouTube. Tumblr is where I used to have a Tumblr page where, you put articles and stuff on. We were some of the first researchers to discover the organizations like Syrian rebel militias and even terrorist groups like ISIS were using everyday social media tools like Facebook pages and YouTube channels to recruit new members and weaponize the internet. Now, this is the guy who literally was using the same things to weaponize the internet for politics, for the Democrat Party. Now, if that doesn't cause you enough heartache to understand that he actually was a part of all this, it goes on. This is going back to the Roy Moore issue. Now, that's what that guy was saying in his own words, Jonathan Morgan. In this story, it says they used thousands of Twitter accounts to make it appear as if automated Russian bot accounts were following and supporting Roy Moore, according to an internet report on the project. The apparent Russia support for Mr. Moore drew broad news and media coverage. So the media was involved. It's not like it drew the media coverage. I'm sure people in the media knew what was happening because they're all connected. Silicon Valley, Washington, D.C., and the media. When I mean they're connected, I mean literally they're connected. They sleep together at night. Many of these people are married. They also created Facebook pages intended to look like conservatives, Alabamians, they call them. And they used to try to split Republicans and promote a conservative write-in candidate to take all the votes from Roy Moore. This is how in-depth this was. This was back when Roy Moore was running in 2018. And I'm sure this is the way it was in 2016 and 2017. Listen, I wrote an article for the Daily Caller before I realized what they were. I wouldn't write anything for the Daily Caller now, but this is when Tucker was still involved with it. And I wrote an article talking about how everything that appeared about the way Hillary Clinton and the Democrat Party were supposedly hacked by the Russians, and how the Russians left footprints around, and the way this stuff was being carried out about the president, about President Trump, then candidate Trump, about the Russians, everything seemed to me like it was a setup. Nothing seemed as though it was completely backwards from the way it looked. They say they were hacked by the Russians. I think they were actually hacked themselves and allowed somebody who knew how the Russians would do it to actually do it and leave what they called footprints behind. The same thing with these meetings with Donald Trump Jr. or any of these other people who were caught up in the Trump-Russian scandal. Those things were set up by people whenever they needed the evidence. It's not like the evidence appeared and then they used it. It's like they said, man, if we only had somebody from the Trump administration or Trump campaign meeting with a Russian ambassador, boom, then it happens. Now you understand how easy it is for that stuff to happen. Well, let's go on a little bit. In 2017, through a fund called Investing in Us, Mr. Hoffman, that's Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, gave money to a small company, American Engagement Technologies. The company leader, Mikey Dickerson, is a former Google employee, yet another Google employee, who founded the United States Digital Service. Have you ever heard of that? The United States Digital Service? During the Obama administration to try and upgrade the federal government's use of technology. At least that's what they said it was for. Remember, sources and methods never appear like they really are. They're going after this over here, but they're going to make it look like it's that over there. They don't literally tell the American people or foreign entities or candidates against them that, or anybody from the government for that matter, that this is who we are and this is what we're doing. It'll always come under some type of a fake identity or fake purpose. An associate of Mr. Hoffman's said that this tool, this total granted to American Engagement was $750,000. So he gave Mikey Dickerson and this company $750,000, and they used that to carry out this false flag attack against Roy Moore and his campaign. Mikey Dickerson, as I said, was a former founder or former employee of Google and the former head of the United States Digital Service, which, when we pull this up again, I went to their website, but I'm also just going to pick it up on Wikipedia because they probably did it themselves. The United States Digital Service is an elite technology unit housed within the executive office of the President of the United States. Okay, can you believe this, folks? Everybody that I looked at that was a former director of this was associated with Silicon Valley, and several of them are associated with Google, many of them for years and years. Matt Cutts, who is, I do believe, is the current director of or head of the USDS, was at Google for 17 years. The guy under him, who I'm not exactly sure what they call him. There was different names when I looked this up. Let's just say assistant director, whatever he's called. Eddie Hartwig. He was with the State Department for years. When you look at Eddie Hartwig and you look at his resume, what it screams is intelligence service. Okay, there's two reasons why people are in the United States State Department foreign services. They're either working with ambassadors or they're there with the CIA, basically. So now we have two people that we know were involved with intelligence agencies, Eddie Hartwig and Jonathan Morgan. And we know that many of these people, including Mikey Dickerson and Matt Cutts, one of the former and current head of the United States Digital Service, are all Google employees. And then when we look at let me pull this up here again. When we look at Jennifer I don't know how you say her last name here. Let me see here. How do you say it, computer?
Paca.
Paca. Okay. Jennifer Paca. I guess that's how you say it. She was the brainchild of the United States Digital Service. And she also took the job as the U.S. Deputy Chief Technology Officer in 2013. All this happened under the Obama administration, okay? She, along with all the rest of these people, are so far into Silicon Valley and into politics and back and forth, and not just politics, directly under the President of the United States, that this is exactly what the deep state is all about. This is the depth. And listen, folks, I spent several hours looking at this stuff. I'm sure that it may sound a little scrambled to you, but it starts to show you the reality of who these people are. James Comey went back and forth into the private sector of military contracting and back into the federal government, from the DOJ and the U.S. Attorney's Office into not just private practice. He did private practice, but also into the military contracting world, and then went back as the director of the FBI. You have generals who get out and go straight into these same companies, whether they're technology in Silicon Valley or defense contracting. You have people like that run this weird USDS, United States Digital Service, that are part of intelligence organizations and from Google directly. This is painting a picture. Those of you that are incredibly good, and some of you are amazing at doing your research, this is the type of stuff that you can take and you can start digging. But what I'm trying to show you through all of this, the whole thing today, is that there's a bigger picture than what's being painted for you in these minuscule headlines that you see on the news. You hardly see any headlines whatsoever when it comes to the reality of what the deep state actually is and how broad of a reach that they have. Listen, they have honed in on social media. It's clear by their own account that they have deceived people in Alabama to win an election, okay? And it was done exactly the way the Hillary Clinton deception was carried out to try to get her to win against the president. You don't hear of this same conservative element on the right. You just don't. Why? Because for 8 years, and probably even before that with President Bush, because I don't trust him either, but at least during the Obama administration, we see how digitally the deep state was being built. And we know that Silicon Valley was deeply involved in the election and re-election of President Obama. I've told those stories about the application where people would go up. They know everything about everybody inside those homes. This is how the deep state has spread. And this is where the news breaks down when it comes to reporting what the deep state actually is. So there you go. Now you have a better way of decoding this picture. The reality is, for years and years, I mean, we can go back 100 years, the left has been growing in power. And this communist movement, all the way back from when Karl Marx worked with the New York Times predecessor as a reporter, a foreign reporter. Now what you have is the deep state entwined and integrated into government. You have people going from the government, from intelligence services into politics and back. You have people going from the intelligence service into politics into Silicon Valley. All the while, they're blaming Trump for everything that they are actually doing. And this is where media stops reporting and where you can start digging to get the real picture. I'm Jonathan Gilliam. This is The Experts. The truth has arrived. Peace, and we're out of here.